Okay, so I'm making this YouTube update about the current astrology, where we have Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the sky right now. Oh, I'm back this up. So we have Mercury retrograde in Cancer now. I'm recording this on July 30th, Monday, July 30th. And this is a time now where we have this Mercury now just turning retrograde. And I want to talk a little bit about what happens when Mercury goes retrograde. Of course, as I'm recording this now, July 30th, 2018, there is, we just had the powerful lunar eclipse in Capricorn, K2 Mars, and that was just a pretty big event. Now we have the moon has moved past and it's going, circling. We're going to have another eclipse over here, August 11th, I believe it is. But Mercury has also turned retrograde to sort of complicate matters a little bit, and want to talk about that a little bit. So I'm doing this on my laptop. I'm visiting San Francisco, so there might be a little bit of, you might hear fan noise and stuff like that. But we'll be able to still, get by and do it. So that'll just be what it is. So anyway, but the thing that we want to understand about retrograde planets, just in general, is that the planet that's retrograde appears to be moving backwards relative to our life on Earth, which is moving forward. So our life on Earth moving forward moves at a certain pace and a certain speed, and that pace is, when a planet appears to go retrograde, then its its speed is not keeping up with the speed of, and so those things tend to slow down, and we have to sort of intentionally bring them into our time. And this is why in general, especially when we talk about Mercury retrograde, it has to do with communications and even technology, and that function of speech and technology and communication with people, again, through different means like computers and whatnot, websites and all the stuff we now deal with, phones and all that, can tend to get a little sketchy and back up. So all the planets, when they're retrograde, have that quality. Like, for instance, Mars is also retrograde right now. So things that have to do with moving forward and fighting battles and just kind of going with it externally in the world, using that energy externally in the world, creates a little bit of confusion and trouble, and we're not sure how to move forward with that thing. And again, we can tend to say, well, that's not good, that's bad, and put that in a gross category of good and bad, which, as you know, if you watch my work, you know that I'm not a big fan of that way of looking at things, because everything is good, and not just because I want to put a smiley face on things, because I have no problem talking about when things aren't good, but simply because it's too simplistic. And in fact, when planets are retrograde, they're closer to the Earth, and they contain much more of their essence, because we are not just flailing away with them externally, which is what we generally do. So it's when planets go retrograde that they become more internal. And the reason they become internal is because externally they tend to screw up a little bit. So for example, the thing that makes us more internal and more reflective and paying more attention to our speaking style, let's say, for example, like the way we speak and communicate and what comes back to us, the thing that makes us aware of that is some problem, is because something screws up, because we say something stupid or we miscommunicate or we get our signals crossed. And then that makes us have to go back and go, oh, I need to pay better attention to that. But if the thing didn't screw up in the first place, we wouldn't probably pay attention to it. Because again, as human beings, we tend to think that we're intellectual or that we're paying attention or that we're intelligent. We are intelligent, but we're also mainly kind of like a programmed animal. We're just kind of getting up and doing our stuff, not really paying a lot of attention to what's going on until something screws up. And then we pay attention to it, usually. Now, not always, but that's often a sort of way that things work. Certainly when planets go retrograde in the sky and we're all under that same influence, we can notice how these things happen. So we're under a sort of collective retrograde. Again, Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. Mars is also retrograde. Saturn is also retrograde. So again, Saturn is retrograde almost half the time. Mars only goes retrograde a few months every couple years. And so when this happens, we're all in this sort of collective sort of confusion or delusion. So I already said that I'm recording this on my laptop, so hopefully it's okay. There's comments about the mic making some strange sounds. It might happen a little bit, but I think it's okay. So we're just going to go with it because I wanted to make this update. So we can see that with this retrograde now, Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde are also aspecting each other, and the sun is also there. So especially having Mercury retrograde aspecting Mars retrograde can definitely bring about some contentiousness and some, potential struggles and battles over ideas. And you want to, be aware that there could be some emotional frustration and some things below the surface that kind of come out in a stressful, willful way over the next, couple weeks, especially because Mercury is going to be retrograde until I think it's August 17th or something. It's in a few weeks, and Mercury is not very strong here. I mean, Mars is actually exalted, so it's a very powerful, disciplined Mars where we're trying to really get ourselves strong and make ourselves stronger. And often that means that we could start sort of cutting people out of our life who are making us weak, or, if not cutting them out of our life permanently, but just kind of not wanting to engage with these situations and scenarios that frustrate us and where we waste our time. So given the fact that this powerful Mars is there with that intention, combined with Mercury, who is in Cancer and also joined Rahu and also joined the Sun. When Mercury's in Cancer, we're sort of kind of confused psychologically because we're, Cancer is an environment of emotion and feeling, and again, Mercury is about the precision of the mind and the intellect and speech. You want to look at Mercury in water signs like Pisces, Scorpio, and Cancer, especially Pisces and Cancer, as being, a sort of metaphor would be like, how well do you communicate when you are crying or when you're upset? That's what Mercury in Cancer is all about. So that's what you want to pay attention to. So I understand you can hear the fan from the laptop and audio is choppy. I'm not going to say it 15 times. Frankly, I've already said it 2 or 3 times to some of you that have been here. It's on the laptop, and I know you can hear that. So I'm going to keep going with it. If you want to just keep commenting on it, you can, but I'm going to ignore the comments from now on because I want to deliver the update, okay? So I thought I would risk it and risk that everybody can handle an update that's from the laptop. And I'm going to just keep going and not answer it. But if you want to just keep having conversations about it, feel free. I'm going to ignore them from now on and just keep delivering what I'm here to talk about. So again, this Mercury retrograde joined Rahu in Cancer and also close to the sun shows where you want to be aware for the next couple weeks that and especially because it's also aspected by Mars, that there could be, some real sort of frustrating issues, even like we're seeing on this YouTube, right? It's Mercury retrograde. We're like the technical issues. I could have waited, but I did it anyway. So I'm just going to keep going. But these are the kinds of things where you can still get the message, and it's good to try to get the message, right? And but notice how how potentially the frustrations of miscommunication or of being trying to communicate, not having it be understood or whatever can create frustration or stress, and maybe staying with it anyway and doing those kinds of things. And staying engaged, like with people, even through frustrating circumstances, because this is the thing that can happen. Mercury is a Rajasic planet, and the Rajasic planets are the ones that keep us engaged with other people, right? It's Mercury and Venus that keep us engaged with other people more than any other, because they're the Rajasic planets. Rajas is about desire, passion, happiness, all of that, right? And like Mars, for instance, is a planet that breaks connection with people. So does the sun, because the sun is about our individuality, right? And so again, when Mercury goes retrograde, it also becomes combust for a certain part of it, and it gets burnt up in the rays of the sun. So will be combust like around at the early part of August, like August 1st to about the 10th or so. Mercury is very deeply combust, and so there can be that frustration flashpoint. But again, so the thing that I wanted, and the reason I wanted to make this update is because it's not just Mercury retrograde and it's, Mercury retrograde, technology, miscommunication, yes, but it's so that you can understand the nature of this one, and especially because it's joined Rahu, the North Node. So there's a lot of perceptive awareness that can really come through this retrograde, because Rahu brings a lot of perception, a lot of intuitive perception. So rather than getting focused and obsessed and sidetracked and frustrated by the potential miscommunications or whatever, you want to be able to understand that there's a deep intuitive connection with this one, because it's in Cancer, which is about the heart and feeling and emotion, and translating, which is Mercury, those feelings and those intuitions into ideas that we understand. And again, so when it goes retrograde, this becomes a very internal process, which is really quite good. And you can see that it can foul up externally when you try to, let's say, express your feelings. When you try to express your feelings in words, it's often confusing for people, because feelings don't make a lot of sense when you try to put them into words. right? And Mercury is where we're trying to make sense with things, have things make sense. So again, I'm saying this to you, but notice this with people around you. Notice people getting frustrated because they can't really put their feelings into words. They're getting confused. They're getting frustrated and angry about it because of that Mars aspect. But then there's also a lot of capacity to have a very, a lot of deep insights into this process because Rahu is there. Rahu, the North Node, it's where the eclipses happen, but there's also enormous perceptive awareness there. But you have to be willing to be introspective. You have to be willing to think outside the box and not just react like a programmed animal. And that's what we tend to do. We're very animalistic. We're very emotional and everything. Like we don't have any discrimination most of the time, or we don't have a lot of spiritual practice. We don't have a lot of foresight. And again, we don't do a lot of spiritual practice and things. So we're just kind of programmed and triggered all the time rather than questioning and reflecting when things go wrong. So again, the real benefit of the retrograde planets is that they're reflective, and that challenges us to be introspective and to reflect and to not just react. When we're able to do that, just in general, the retrograde planet becomes a powerful source of wisdom. So anyone who has retrograde planets in their natal chart, which most of us have at least one or two, those planets, even though they might be confusing, they're really great sources of like intuitive perception, because you've had to reflect on that thing in order to understand it. Because the external things with the retrograde planet don't unfold so easily. So you have to keep going back and working with them. And the best example, or a good example, is when you're driving in a car and you pass a slower moving car. When you pass the slower moving car, it looks like that car is moving backwards. Of course, it's not moving backwards. If you're moving 60 miles an hour and the car next to you is moving 30 miles an hour, it's going to look like it's moving backwards as you pass it, right? And so that's kind of what the retrograde planets do. And if you're on a journey with that person, let's say the people in that slower moving car, and like you can't check into your hotel until they also get to the destination, which is literally what a retrograde planet is like, then even though you can move faster than them, you're not really going to get anything done until they catch up with you. If you're both driving to New York City and your car goes 60 and theirs only goes 30 and they got the key to the hotel, you're not checking in until they get there either. And so a retrograde planet is like that part of your life. In order to have that thing yield its fruit and yield its result, you have to wait for it. And waiting for it means you have to keep going back, just like in the slow moving car, and making sure their car hasn't broken down, making sure that they're okay. And doing that constant attention means that you learn a lot about that thing, right? Just imagine yourself in that situation. If that was the energy that you needed to, like I say, check into your hotel at the destination, by the time the car got there, you would know as much about the car probably as the people in the car, because you've had to put so much attention on whatever those themes are. So it's just like that with the retrograde planet. Like if it's a retrograde, let's say 7th house ruler, then that means that your relationships, the ruler of the relationships is retrograde. So let's say you have to, in order to have the relationship work, you have to keep going back and putting all of that attention on it. And that's going to make you very sensitive to those things. It might not feel good because feels like there's all these obstacles and all these delays, but at least you're going to understand that thing. So that's really the way to understand retrograde planets, sort of abstracted, in the abstract. That's how to understand them, in a general sense. And then specifically, you look at what the planets are and what they rule to see specifically how that retrograde planet plays out. So for each of us now, there are 3 planets retrograde in the sky: Saturn, Mars, and Mercury. So that's a lot of house rulers. That's like half the chart. because they rule 6 houses for all of us, and that and all of those, because that means that the rulers of Gemini and Virgo, Aries and Scorpio, and Capricorn and Aquarius, those 6 signs, wherever they fall, whichever house they fall in your chart, all of those energies are kind of like not moving forward. It's not that unusual to have 3 planets retrograde, by the way, but this is how you want to understand it, okay? And so again, you just want to keep in mind for the next couple weeks as Mercury goes retrograde in Cancer and brings about that intuitive connection to feelings and this need to reflect on them and be patient with them as you try to make sense of them. Don't get frustrated. Don't lash out, or because again, Mars is aspecting, who is saying, I don't feel like putting time into that, or kind of, trying to be disciplined and strong. It's better when these things don't influence, but now that they're influencing each other, they can bring some difficulty, but they can also bring some benefit. Mercury can help bring some skill to that potential Mars frustration. Mars can bring some courage to that potential Mercury confusion. And we can sort of work through this, these two energies. Because they're also happening in Cancer and Capricorn, which is where we're having eclipses. So again, that's another whole thing to sort of bring in there. There's a lot of perceptive awareness with that, but again, there's always a potential for a lot of confusion, but also a lot of insight. They kind of work hand in hand. And they work this way because the confusion comes from the idea that basically says, oh, I thought I had a clue. Oh, I thought I understood this thing. I thought I knew about this. And then the nodes come and we have eclipses at those points, and they basically blows out our paradigm and says, I had no idea what this thing is really about. I had no idea. I thought I understood this quality of the world, and I have no idea. So now I'm not sure what I'm doing. That forces us to look at it and to grow. But it's often against our will. And then we just turn it into a big emotional experience. We wind up fighting it and just kind of trying to say, when's it going to end? When's it going to stop? Instead of surfing and riding that to a lot of perceptive awareness, because that's where all of our great insights come as well. So again, this is just another way to explain how rich the spiritual power is now, with all these planets getting hooked into this powerful eclipse mode with the exalted Mars there and whatnot. So this eclipse cycle and this eclipse time is very, powerful. But that's what it needs. That needs to happen anyway, if we're going to have spiritual growth. So I know that the connection is maybe a little clunky, and I appreciate people bearing with this call. I wanted to make this for you because I thought it was important, and I'm glad that you're able to get something from this, even though there was maybe some technical snafus here and there, and we'll just leave it at that.